So I thought we could start the afternoon session just for me to describe a little bit what our thoughts were with your two home assignments. And then after that we can spend some time making sure that you all have your Creative Suite installed and working correctly. And once you have that, I can show you some brief settings that are good to do to help you get started and avoid some of the annoyances with the software that are normally quite disturbing with the basic installation. And then after the coffee break, we can have a bit of a personal working session where you just try to get started with the assignments, and I can be around to answer any questions that you have. So that part is more sort of voluntary, how long you want to stay and work, or if you want to go home and continue there. So this part will also be part of the web-based documentation that you can download later on. So these two home assignments are not meant as a means to sort of have as your forced mandatory things just to make this into a course. It's actually meant to push you to get started and to use these applications together, to use Illustrator and also to use it together with the InDesign software and to learn how to get data into it. Because we work with so many different modalities of data, and they come from different sources, and we need us to know how to get that all in. So the first assignment, both assignments are meant as things you would want to do anyway, and I hope that will be true if you hear about these things that we have in mind, that you will say, well, these things are in the back of my head that I wanted to do anyway. So the first one, we want to test a little bit of your creativity and really getting to know Illustrator. And to do that, we all have these needs to present our data and communicate concepts. And the idea here is to take one of your concepts that you're working on in your daily scientific life that you normally want to communicate. It can be for a review article, it could be for a presentation that you want to do, maybe your introduction to your thesis, or to layman communication. It can be at any level of technical detail. What we want you to do, though, is try to streamline the concept, to have one idea that you want to communicate, not building too complex things, but really trying to dissect out what mechanisms are difficult to communicate in what you're doing. What questions normally come up? What would you do if you wanted to present this in an introduction or a review article? And then build from that concept outwards. And so it can be either, in the end, something printed, but it could also be aimed at a PowerPoint keynote presentation. That part doesn't matter. What's important, though, is that it should be useful for you. You should do this not as a means to submit to us, but instead something that you can actually use later on. And you need to produce this your own from scratch. So you cannot take something that is already published somewhere else and redo and modify. You want to actually start from the basic concept, something that is starting from a sketch in your mind. It can still be inspired by other things, of course, but you want to make sure that all parts of this are produced by you from the start, so you know how to follow the whole flow of things when doing this. And that part will be more clear tomorrow, I think, how you can get started with drawing new things. And we want you here to focus on getting used to Illustrator. So it should be, in the end, a fully vector-based Illustrator file, so that you can then take that one and make into a PowerPoint slide or into something that's printed in your publication. And then what we would like you to do is submit it as this original file. And the reason why I would want you to do that rather than create a PDF or EPS file is that then we can see a little bit what type of techniques you use. And this is especially in InDesign. You can do the same thing in 10, 20 different ways, but they are very different in their efficiency. And it may be so that we can spot things that you're doing in a suboptimal way by seeing the original file. The second home assignment is based on the same concept, but the target is different. So here we really want you to think about how to bring data together. And the core of bringing data together is in InDesign. So the foundation is in design there, that you want to make sure that you can take illustrations, take graphs, clean them up in Illustrator and bring everything together in InDesign. So there, the aim you want to think about is in one of your upcoming papers that you're working on, that you have some data that you would like to test to bring in. Where can you find a multi-panel figure that you want to generate? And the idea with this figure is that you want to have something that includes both original scientific data that is pixel-based, something that comes from Western blot data, could come from microscope, something else that has this pixel concept that has to be there, but also mixing it together with vector-based data. And that could be, as I said, a graph. It could be output from your qPCR, anything that you want to maintain as vector-based data and bringing that together. And there you want to really aim this towards a printed version. So it should be aimed at generating a figure. It should have sort of the right sizes and everything there to make sure that you can handle these things with getting the right resolution out in the end. So here the key concept is to include something real data. But because you're sharing it with us, we will not send it further out. But because it will be in this environment and we want to take this up, it's good that you use your real data, but you can anonymize it later on. So you can just put in something like group 1, group 2, data variable 1. We don't care what it says on your axis. Just make sure that you use something that is real so that you learn all the pitfalls with the applications that you use. And this is to make sure that you don't do it in vain, that you can easily convert it back to something useful. And then really make sure that you try to use these different modalities that we use. So try something. It could be a little bit artificial in that sense that you may have wanted to split it into two figures, one being from your confocal and one being other measurement data. But just try in this case to merge so that you have this composite, because that helps you to know that you can bring your data to an end stage where everything is mixed together. And then it has to be composited in InDesign. But here it's a little bit different because InDesign files are normally linked to a lot of subfiles, which I'll show you. So submitting that as the original files is a bit more complicated. So to aid you in it, we suggest you to create a PDF file in the end of this. And so you want to export that PDF file in the same way as you would export something for print. So have it all in 300 dots per inch so that it looks nice. And at the end, I would like not to get all of these through email. So what you will do, and you have that information also in the email I sent out yesterday, is to upload it to this link here. So the drop it to me is just a very simple thing which can upload a file to my Dropbox. So what you do is just to put in the password on this, which is the SciGraph2012, which is in that email. I'll send it again. And then you can just upload a file here that you select. So it's a very trivial thing to upload to this one. And this we want to have from you at the early morning of the 10th, so that we have a day of chance to look through these files. So you have a rather short time, but it still should be sufficient to get started. And it doesn't mean that you have to have this all finished in the end, but at least have two concepts that are approaching something that is complete. That's the goal for you to do in this. And as I said, the two home assignments here are really to help you get started. It's not something that is for our sake. But do it in the way that you feel, especially the first of the two assignments, is the goal that we can have them viewed by all participants on the 11th. So you can show them to each other, and by this you can get the inspiration what's actually possible to do with my level of knowledge in this application. Because you see something's out by professional illustrators that have been working many years, and it's difficult to relate that to where you are yourself. So it can be quite nice to see what other people with the same level of knowledge can do, and then inspire each other on those. And for the second one with the original data, this is more for the discussion on the day of how to composite things, how to put them together, and having possibilities to ask questions about that.
Yeah. So with the graph,
Mm-hmm.
if I have my images and then I have a quantification with the graph, I
Mm.
make the graph like this. So when I take that file into InDesign,
Mm.
it won't be vector-based.
It will. After tomorrow, you will know how to do it.
Okay.
So that's Prism will be one of the applications I will show, but also some of these original measurement tools, how you can do that to maintain vector-based data, because that's a key aspect to making sure that everything looks nice. So that will be one of the cases tomorrow, how to bring this all together. Any other questions at this point? Did anybody not get the assignment document yesterday? I had a bit of a struggle to get you the right link. I think I managed the third time, but let me know if you don't have it. So there you have all this information on also the password and how to upload that. And you have my email, so if there's any problem with it, just let me know. So that's it on the home assignments. And I thought now we could start with the InDesign setup. The first thing that I like to do when working with Illustrator is actually to bring this version back to original version when it comes to color handling. And the challenge is like this, that Illustrator has its roots really within the printing world. And when you print things with different dyes, that what comes out is very different from what you actually meant to print. And this is a challenge because sometimes when you print all these three colors together, it looks black on your screen, but then when you print it out, it actually is a grayer color. And so if you would have this three-color black, it's a different black than the keyed black dye. And it becomes even worse if you actually make two black circles. And now I think I'll see if I can show this to you. Is when in the original mode of Illustrator, if you have your colors, sorry, here, and we are working, sorry, I'm in the wrong, it should be here. My colors have really just changed this version here. Oh, sorry, here. So if we're working with something that is 100% black on one side here, and then you have something that is 100% of all the other three colors, you see that these guys are not the same black. And if you then have this black here on the same, this is looking the same black on the screen here as that guy. So this one contains only the black dye that you would print, and this one contains the black dye you would print with the other four colors, the three colors. So by simulation of this, Illustrator tries to adjust your colors that you view on the screen to fit what would be printed. And that is actually quite tricky and will give you issues that are quite unpredictable when you're working on this for non-print presses. And it tries to do this with something called color sync. So it keeps track of how different print presses work. And it does this by default. But the issue is that you do never know what print press each publication you have will have. So you can just guess how that works. So what I suggest you do is to go into color settings, and you actually have the settings up here, where it now says that it has the general purpose American print press styles. And what you can do there is to actually set this to emulate Illustrator 6. And so Illustrator's numbering scheme is a little bit strange, because it started with Illustrator 1 up to 10, and then came Illustrator CS1. So it's actually now Illustrator 16, if you would think it that way. But this is going back to sort of the roots of how color handling used to work. So if you go to that one, it takes away all its own internal color handling. And it makes it so that the color you specify is the one that it shows. It doesn't have this translation layer in between. And that means that the black you have with all of these three are now identical. So it doesn't care if you create your black with all these three colors or with the black in the fourth. They are all looking the same. And it's much more easy to predict how that will look when you move it to other software as well. So this is just one thing to get around many of these annoyances that you would see when you export a graph, that it doesn't look pitch black. It actually has 95% gray if you look at it in other applications. It still enables your printers to adjust it to their print presses, but then it will be much more adjusted to the exact print press that it will actually be printed on. So that's the first tip here. The other tip that I wanted to give you is when it comes to installing this Creative Suite, what you have done now is to install the professional version of Acrobat. And the professional version of Acrobat has a lot of good functions. It enables you to create PDFs and to export images from them and modify in many different ways. But it's also a bit invasive. And the thing it does badly is to, on the Mac side at least, it is also invasive in the way that it is taking over the preview of PDF files everywhere. So what you want to do is actually to get rid of this thing that it is previewing all the PDF files that you download from the net in your browser through Acrobat. And that part, let me see, I just want to make sure that I can show you how it actually works before I take it away. No, I cannot show that again. So what it does is that when you open a PDF in a web page, it opens Acrobat within your Safari, Chrome browser, or anything like that. And that's a very slow process of using it. So for Mac users, what I suggest you to do is to go into the library folder where this plugin is. So what you can do is to press your Command key up on this one here, and you can go down to your computer and into your hard disk here. So at the root of your hard disk, you have a folder called Library. And in this library folder, you have something called Internet Plugins. And here you have all the plugins that are taking over when you have different things like Silverlight, QuickTime, and Flash, and other things. On my computer, I've already taken away the Acrobat plugin. But there is an Acrobat plugin that is lying in this folder. And what I would just do is to delete that plugin, and you will get rid of the opening in Acrobat for all those PDF files and using the preview application instead. And it's 10 times as quick. So you will get a much better experience working that way. But you can still use the full Acrobat in every other means. It's just that for previewing articles and other things, you don't need to get it through this heavy application every time. So let me know if you can't find that, and I'll come and show you where it is. But
Just delete it.
just delete that one. So these are really the first key things you need to familiarize with you. The other thing that I wanted to recommend you today is for Windows users. And this is to get in something that enables you to print to PDF files. And this, it's built in already for Mac OS users, that you can, in any print dialog, print it to a PDF file. And that's one of the best rescue ways if your applications don't support exporting into a vector graphics, that you can actually print it to a PDF and save it that way. So in Mac OS you get this for free and it's built in. In Windows it's not as well built in from the start. But fortunately there is a free application, and this free application is called Primo PDF. And that's also on this USB memory. And it's much smaller, so we can send around a couple of these, and you can install that if you want to get this Primo PDF today. Otherwise, you can download it free from the net. And what this Primo PDF is that it's sort of like a simulated printer. And it puts a small icon here, but it also puts a printer in. So here I'll get back to the details, but if, for example, if you have an application like this would be a good example of something that is the acquisition tool. That is, now this is for a qPCR, and we should be able to take some basic data set here. And this is what you normally experience from many of these applications, is that when you try to save anything like this image here, you have save image as. And when you look at these file formats, and as I said, I'll get back to exactly what these all mean, none of these file formats are good. They are all pixel-based, so it will all just make this into an image. And you cannot do anything with that data when it comes out. But the advantage is that if you now have something that is actually taking the language of our printers, the PostScript, and it's making it into PDF files, it can then rescue all that data out for you. So what you would do instead is just here to right-click on this and say print. And when you have the print dialog, now with Primo PDF installed, you have the option to save this as a PDF file. So then it prints, and here you can choose what quality you want, and as long as you keep this pre-press version, you have all the quality in the file that you want.
How is that different from a normal PDF printer?
So this works the same way on the Mac when you print as PDF, but in Windows it's not built in as default. So that's only for Windows that you need this Primo PDF. On the Mac, I'll show you how that looks also. So that if you have this, let me see if we can go in here. I'll just save this back to my...
Thomas?
Yes?
Does this only work with this Primo PDF or with any other PDF version? So like, I have this PDF 995.
As long as it can become a printer in the Windows, it should be the same. The Primo is just the one I prefer because it's free and it gives quite good quality on the PDFs. I haven't tried the one that you said, but it could. There are probably thousands of different versions. So let me just go into and put it here. And we'll now save this as this nicely document file. So now what I've created is a PDF file of this graph. And what you see now is that this one is actually not pixels, but it is these lines. So now we have rescued out the vector graphics out of the software without the software knowing that. So it's really a good tool to use on all your measurement computers as well. To have it, because it's free, you can install it anywhere. And many of these measurement computers are Windows, and then you can just export your data as the PDF files there. So that's a very useful rescue that you can make sure to download. So that's Primo PDF. Okay, so that was the...
So, but on an ordinary PC, when you say print,
Yes.
there is an option to print as PDF instead. Is that
I think that, well, that's because you have installed Acrobat, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's the other thing. If you have Acrobat Professional, then you can do this. So it's just that that's a free version. So the question is like this, that if you have installed Acrobat, you have something called the Adobe PDF printer. And that one also works equally well, but it requires you to have the full commercial package on that computer. So it may not be what you want on all your measurement computers, but on your own PC, that's, of course, perfectly fine. So that one works equally well. On your Mac, you have this, as I said, already installed by default, and it looks then very similar. So if we just take something here, and we just want to print these guys, you have your print dialog, here, and download, down in this bottom here, you have save as a PDF. So there, you see, you can also save it as the raw PostScript, but in many ways, the PostScript can be more confusing for you, so that it's easier to work with the PDF file format there in many ways. So there you also have this same alternative.
what's the difference between an Adobe PDF and an PDF?
Yes, so the Adobe PDF is what Acrobat is installing itself. So that's going through the Adobe package. When you do this, you can see that then it opens another dialog where you can actually change your quality. You can make it into the CMYK or RGB colors, and you have a much more of those parameters to work with. But that also requires that you have installed the professional version of Acrobat. So you always have that alternative as well, but on all Macs, regardless of if you have any other software installed, you can always save as the normal PDF. And that, the first version here, save as PDF, it doesn't itself have any of those options to increase quality or other things. It's just an uncompressed PDF file there. So that gives you the raw data. The next thing you want to know before you can get started with your home assignments is, of course, how to get started with your Illustrator. And one tip that we'll get more into tomorrow is also that use some templates before you start drawing. What's challenging for most people is to have a sort of an image or a shape in your mind and start working with the Bezier curves to create that. What's easier is if you have a template behind it that you can actually start to sketch on. So nowadays we have all these copier machines that can scan to email. So I would recommend you, when you start working on your figures, to sketch it out on a piece of paper. And just sketch out the outlines of all shapes you want to put in, not text and things, just sort of the basic outlines, and just scan that in. And then you can put it behind and start to draw on it. And it makes it easier to understand how your shapes should go, how the curves should fit in to what you're trying to do. So that's one sort of good, easy tip to get going. And then you also see what primitive shapes can you use, what other things like that can you have to get started. So any comments on what looks more or less complicated in the software that I can help you with sort of as a group, that you would want to see how it's done before you dig in?
I was wondering if you could show a little bit about how to color figures and maybe do gradients and, I don't know, maybe 3D kind of structure.
Absolutely. So many of these things will come in more detail tomorrow, especially working with transparencies. and these things. What we can start to think about is the concept of the shape. So in Illustrator, when you have a drawing like this, it has 3 different parameters that it's added on top. One is what's the color of the filling of the whole thing. And the filling is the full square down here that says fill. And the stroke color is the other parameter that you have to work with, and that's the one with the box inside here. And when you click one of these, you activate that one to manipulate. So when you have the stroke in front, that's the one you manipulate when you change colors. So if I just make that into a red, then you change the stroke color, and here you change the inner color of this shape. The third thing you have as a parameter for each shape is the width of your line on this. So here, when you select it, you have the stroke width. And then you can change the width here as well. It doesn't change anything with the original shape. You see the anchors are located in the exact same place. You have them in the center of the line always like this. And then this line can have many different parameters. So if you show options for lines, and this you will see different in different versions of Illustrator, but nowadays your options for each line have become quite complex. So you can choose to have your line on the inside or outside of your definition here. So that can be important if you're working with very thick lines and want to align different things. So if I have this shape that has a line on it, and I want to align that with, we can make that into a square, with a square that does not have any stroke at all. So we can then go to here and say that I want the stroke to be transparent. So if I do align these two on this side, you would see that they align on the inside of the stroke in this case, because I put a stroke on the outside. So there it's important that you then may want this stroke to be on the inside of the other one if you want the alignment to look correct. So those things are good to also get used to, how the lines are put and where. Another thing comes to these gradients and how you can work with them. And gradients have been complicated to work with in many ways. They are not the sort of the traditional thing that has been implemented in this type of PostScript files, but they have become much better in recent years. But they have some intrinsic limitations, and that is that they need to be uniform within a shape. So if you put a gradient within that shape, it can be a radial gradient or a linear gradient. And what does that mean is, if I go to the filling again here, and then click this one is the gradient version, it makes a gradient within this circle. And this is what's called a linear gradient. So it goes from one color on the left side here into another one on the right. And you specify this in this gradient palette. And there, with all gradients, you have 3 parameters to think about: the start color, the end color, and then it's the gamma shape of the transition. And what is the gamma curve of a transition? It's how linear the acceleration from one color is to the next one. So if you have that center dot, which is this one, if that is put in the middle of the 2 colors, it means that it goes gradually with the same speed from black to white. If I move this closer to the white, it's a higher acceleration in the early part, and then it slows off. So you have this accelerated curve on one side to the other, and then it changes to the other side like this. These are the 3 basic parameters of a gradient. Then you can decide on how this gradient should be located within the shape. And that's done with a specific tool that looks like this one. So this is a gradient tool. And now you see that the gradient, which is shown here from the left to right, is covering the whole shape. You may not want that. You may actually want to have the gradient only from one side and end somewhere here. Or you may want this to not be fully horizontal. And if you don't want this to be fully horizontal, then you have two options. One is, you see when you move it close to this one, it changes your cursor. And with this other cursor, you can then start to rotate. And this is a tool that's quite confusing in that way, that it looks like now it's changing size and going totally outside. And it is. And this, I still haven't really figured out why they do it that way. So you want to make sure that you are sort of using it in that way that it helps you. Now it did confusing for me as well. So you really need to see that the cursor changes its icon before you start rotating it. And then when you have rotated it, you can use the shift key again to make sure that you get the sort of 45-degree angle. And then after that, you need to, again, resize it to fit your... So it's not the most intuitive tool to work with, but you can there create easy gradients. The other thing, you can change that angle is by, in this gradient tool as well, you can write that into 45 degrees. So this is a very standard gradient. The other option you have is to make a radial gradient, and then it has the origin being the same of this first starting color of the gradient, and then it goes to the end color here. This one I find much more limiting to work with in the way that you cannot change this to be other thing than perfectly radial. So you see this shape now that it has this perfectly radial gradient, but if I go in and say that, well, this round circle should now be... Oh, it actually has upgraded that in the new Illustrator. So you learn something every day. Now it's not as limiting as it was before. And it's this parameter that's come in here. So this you will not find in the earlier versions, but then you can actually start to say that it isn't fully circular anymore, that it actually can be more oblong. So that's, if you go back and say that this is 100%, that's how it would have looked previously. So then you see that the gradient is not following your shape anymore. So then it can actually be more predictable. That's great. So this is what you would expect it to work.
Can you still go in and change manually the numbers and get it?
Yes. So you can change this back to be 100% like this, or, well, in the other way, like this. So you can modify it exactly how you want. So once you have this gradient within there, let me just bring this back to a circle, then you can again change how that gradient behaves within this. So you can put your origin, your highlight can be on one side. It doesn't have to have the gradient sort of completed on all sides in this one. It can look quite nice if you just have it to look a highlight on one side. It gives you this 3D appearance. So that's a bit of basic gradients, but when you want to then go further on, you want to maybe in some cases work with multiple colors in your gradient. And that's also perfectly feasible. What you want to do is to then work in the same gradient tool here, and you can start to add more of these color tabs. So these two end colors, black and white, first they don't have to sit in the ends. They can be moved into another location, but you can also start to add new ones. So this one here can be white again, and now you have a multiple gradient within, and then you can change all of these gammas as well. So you can make quite complex gradients and shapes with this tool. So that's on gradients. Any other of questions? Did this answer your first question? Now when you've been playing with this, have you got any new questions, things that was unclear this morning that you didn't realize? So one.
How can you sense the gradient on the, let's say, upper left side of the circle?
So, just for me to understand, so you have a circle, and you want to make a gradient, a radial gradient in the circle?
Gradient, but have it, the center of the gradient on the upper left
so
corner.
You go in and make this radial, and you say you want this one, the point of, this here. So you can move like I did here, is to have this dot origin can be up there. Then you make this skewed version, but the other version, let me see if I remember this, is to, they move this one like this. So there are two different ways. So you see when I move the whole thing, then it retains the circle appearance of your gradient. So then you can move it up to that corner.
But can you do it on the CS5? No.
I think so. So you have to have this gradient tool selected. Maybe I can just... It worked. Good. The other thing that I was not very clear with earlier on is how to select the different tools in the palette here. So what you want to do if you want to work with circles and other things is just to press and hold. It's not a right click, if that was not clear. So just by pressing and holding you can get all of these tools. Any other questions right now? Yes?
Is there an easy way, once you're in a tool, like you've been drawing a circle, then you want to get out of that tool, and you, instead of spending time going up and clicking on the arrow?
Yes. There are all of these shortcuts. So after each of the tools, you see a letter. And that means that you can switch to that one. So if I am in the square and I press the V, I get back to the original pointer because it's a V.
Apple
Just V. So this you can do for all the tools. The other option you can do is, for example, if I draw, let's just get back to this. So if I draw now a square and I want to quickly adjust this square, I, on the Mac, press the command button. And pressing and holding the command button brings you back the normal pointer. So then I can scale this one down, and then when I let go of the command button, you're back into drawing squares. So that one you can go, and so you switch between your pointer and that tool you're in right now. Another useful thing is the switching between your back and front color. So you see that one now has a shift version, and then it's shift X. And then you cycle between, so you flip your fill and stroke color. So you see these two guys, and then you go to the other version. And you can always go back to the default fill and stroke by clicking this button down here or the letter D. That's another useful tool. There come up two questions that are good to know. When you're drawing, one thing that you often want to do, especially when you work with a Pathfinder, is to make two copies of the same object on top of each other. And so maybe I can steal this concept that you draw on the cylinder. So if you want to make it a cylinder, you may want to start with just a box like this and creating two circles. And by doing these two circles, you can then have something that looks like a cylinder like this, but it has of course, the problem of that something should be hidden. So the bottom one is easy here. If we just go to the Pathfinder again, that you can join them like this. The top is fine as long as you keep this white. But if you have this transparent, you see you have a line there that you want to get rid of. What you can do now is then to have the top object here, and you want to subtract that from the other one with Pathfinder. But then you want, if you only do that, if you take the minus top, then you have lost the top of the cylinder. So what you can do is to copy this object in Edit, and you say Copy, and then you have the option, sorry, now I'm working Windows, to paste in front. So when you have the normal paste, it pastes it in the center of your view. So it doesn't paste it at the place where it was copied. But if you do the other version, to say undo, to paste on top, in front, then it pastes it in the exact same place. So now you have three objects here. You have the back of the cylinder and two circles here. Now you want to select only one of these circles and not the other, but that's impossible because they are totally on top of each other. So what you can do is to drag from here, select all of it, and then use the Shift key. So when you use the Shift key for selection, it means that you add or subtract an object from selection. So by having the Shift key and clicking on the top circle here, it takes away one of the circles from your selection. It doesn't show it, but that one is not at all selected anymore. So if I then go back and take minus front, it takes away one of the circles, but leaves the other in perfect place. So if I move this bottom out, I've now created this other version. So you can then make an object that only has the parts that you see, no hidden parts in this. And that's important if you would want to make this cylinder transparent. Then you want to make sure that you don't have lines within, because they wouldn't look good.
So then you have to group it.
So then you would want to group these, yeah. If you want to keep them as one object in the end and work together. So that was... Sorry?
How do you group it?
How do you group? Yes. So that's another thing, that you have two versions of that. I always use the shortcut, but there should also be in objects you have group. So then these have been now one object. So when you click it, it's still a group. With groups in Illustrator, you have this that you can go in and adjust different parts. So when I now scale the whole group, you see that everything is scaled together. So I can change the whole cylinder, but then everything changes like that. If I double click this group, you see it changes up here. And now I'm in this group and I can select different parts. So now I can select only the top and I can move it out like this. Then when I click this arrow back, then I'm outside the group again, but they are still kept as one group. So it remembers which ones were grouped, but you can go in and change parts in this group.
Can you ungroup it?
Yes. So that's in the same object you have ungroup. And then they are now free-floating, two of them again. Another parameter that is important is to be able to move things in front or behind each other. And that is done in the same, let me just show you an example of two circles like this. And you have this one to be black and the other one should be white. So you may have two objects that are one in front of the other. Then you have the option of going into Arrange, and you can bring this object, either send it all to the back, which means that it puts it in lowest of all objects in your layer, or you can bring it backwards one. So then it just moves behind the previous one and in the stack. So then you can move them down and up again. So that's important when you want to work with this minus front, minus back, and you can then adjust these things. So now we have coffee outside. So I think we can do like this, that after the coffee, it's really up to you if you want to stay and work on things and get some help. Otherwise, we can end up with questions now when it comes to the assignments. Is there anything outstanding on these things that are unclear, or all perfectly clear? Excellent. Great. So for those of you who have other things to do, thank you for coming today.